Hi friends, my name is Andrew Connard. I'm the pastor at Susanna Wesley United Methodist Church. I want to welcome you to this week's version of our Leader Development Book Club. We're reading Canoeing the Mountains by Tod Bolsinger. It is a book that guides us, that helps us think about the way that God might be using us and the ways that we might approach leadership as we move into the days ahead. This week, we're taking a look at Chapter 2, Adventure or Die. And I want to remind you that a tool that I'm using, and I'm going to invite you to use as we interact with this content, is three symbols to help give a guidance about, how do we make sense of this and where do we find action for us today. The first of those symbols is a question mark. And the question mark reminds us to consider things that are new, that answer questions that we may have had, or things that bring up new questions for us. So these are new things we've learned, or they spur on some other questions for us. The second symbol that we're using is a sun or a light. And the sun is a symbol that reminds us to look for things that really help us gain perspective about something that's going on in our life, in our ministry, in our church, or there's things that are going on in our lives, our ministry, or in our congregation and community that give a perspective on what the text, what the author has given for us. And finally, the arrow. The arrow is the symbol that helps remind us to look for guidance or direction. Where can we learn? How can we move ahead? Where might be God pointing a way through these words for us together as a congregation and community? So I invite you to read along. You can find our reading plan at our website, and we'll be taking on one chapter every week. Today, like I said, is Chapter 2, Adventure or Die. And I just want to share some of my reflections on these words. The first is the question mark, and I want to share just a little bit longer passage for you. I just found it so helpful. Tod Bolsinger writes this: "We too, maybe even more so than other entities, have entered uncharted territory," and he's talking about the church here. "Just as Lewis and Clark functioned under a set of geographical assumptions, leaders of the church in the West today have been operating under a set of philosophical, theological, and ecclesiological assumptions. Like Meriwether Lewis sitting on the crest of Lemhi Pass and looking at a landscape he couldn't have imagined, Christian leaders today are sitting in meetings, reading reports, and conversing with colleagues about a brutal truth. All that we have assumed about leading Christian organizations, all that we have trained for, is out of date. We have left the map, we are in uncharted territory, and it is different than we expected. We are experienced river rafters who must learn to be mountaineers, and some of us face the most terrible mountains we have ever beheld." And I found this so helpful to answering the question for me sometimes. Sometimes I do feel that what I was prepared for, the training that I received in seminary, the experiences that I've had in serving churches in the past, where's the fruit of that now? How can I use these tools in ways that are effective? Because sometimes I feel like I try to do how I've been trained, and it just doesn't work. Or it doesn't work in the same way that it has in the past. And I found it so helpful to my question of, how am I supposed to act? And the recognition, the connection there that he writes, all that we have assumed about leading Christian organizations, all that we have been trained for, is out of date. So I guess that's a little bit of a relief, perhaps, just to have that named, to gain some clarity about the training that I've received may not be helpful to lead us into the future. And I wonder what that's like for you. Are there ways that you've identified that your leadership in an organization, in the church, that has shifted and it may not be able to be as effective as you've known it to be in the past? This was the question for me, the question mark for me from this chapter of Canoeing the Mountains. Next, the sun or the light was just one of these. And again, I just want to say, I'm picking out just a few quotes that were meaningful for me, that align with these things. But man, it is rich material. And so these are just a few highlights of what I found from the chapter. Bolsinger writes this: "Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery were about to go off the map and into uncharted territory. They would have to change their plans, give up expectations, even reframe their entire mission. What lay before them was nothing like what was behind them. There were no experts, no maps, no best practices, and no sure guides who could lead them safely and successfully. The true adventure, the real discovery, was just beginning." And this just gave perspective on how it feels to be a church leader in this season. There are no experts about how to do church today. And when I'm recording it, we are still in the midst of a pandemic and the beginning of 2021. And man, no one is an expert on this. We are all adventuring into unknown territory. And so the perspective that this text lent for me was just a comfort that we're not alone in this. That there are other church leaders across the country and around the world that are trying to figure things out just like we are. And instead of feeling onerous and burdensome, like, oh, why can't I find the answers? That we have an opportunity to say, well, how can this be an adventure? How do we approach this as an adventure and leading into wherever it is that God might be directing us, the places in our community where God is already at work? It's exciting. It's an opportunity that we haven't seen before. And there's some parts that are scary about that. And there's part of that that is life-giving and exciting as we join this adventure. Finally, that leads into the arrow that I found from this chapter that gives us guidance and direction. Bolsinger writes this: what is needed? A spirit of adventure, where there are new, unexpected discoveries, serendipities, and ultimately new perceptions. To be sure, this is an adapt or die moment. And you remember that he gives the example of the movie Moneyball, in which the lead character says, we have to adapt or die. As a congregation, we have to change in ways that will adapt to the current reality of our community, that remain faithful to the good news of Jesus Christ, or we won't exist anymore. We need to continue to find ways to connect with the next generation, with new people, or the folks that are currently a part of the church will be the end of the story here. Now, I don't think that's the case. I know that God is at work in our congregation and will continue to be so, but we have to try to find new ways of doing things. We have to adapt what we're currently doing. We have to make a sense of the community around us, and how do we connect with households and families that live right close by, and yet perhaps may not know about what happens in this building or among this community. So this really pointed the way for me to say, we've got to find new and unexpected discoveries. We can't lean on what we've known before. I can't trust always the experience that I've had in the past to be effective for the future. We have to find new ways of understanding, new perceptions, new ways about being the church, because God continues to call us, and we continue to have opportunities before us. And the ways that we've used, the methods that we've used in the past may not be the ones that we'll need to use to be faithful in the future. I'm excited about what the days ahead will hold. I believe that God has things in mind for Susanna Wesley that we haven't even imagined yet, that we may not have even dreamed of yet. And it's a journey that we're on together. So I'm so glad that you're part of this Leader Development Book Club. I hope that you share this content with others, that you leave a comment about your own question mark, your sun, and your arrow. We're considering ways that we might continue to maybe build a little bit more of a community around this outside of what you might leave in the comments. So look for those coming up in the weeks ahead. Thank you for reading with me. Thank you for engaging, and I hope that you have a great day.